In April of 2016, a woman came to visit my family's farm in New York, where we teach people about the 40 years we've spent homesteading on our 16-acre property, raising much of our own meat and vegetables. And during her visit, she went on a tour with my mother. And during the tour, in response to a question from the group about the cow's age and how long she would live on the farm, my mother explained that our cow was being raised for beef. The next day, the same woman called the farm, spoke with my dad, and said she wanted to buy the cow. She explained to him that she wasn't a vegetarian, she didn't have an issue with eating meat, but she felt that because we allowed people to come to our farm and interact with our animals, we shouldn't then be allowed to use them for food. She suggested that we could probably go to Whole Foods and buy our meat like everyone else. When she was told no, that the cow was not for sale, this woman became angry. She did not understand that for us, homesteading was a lifestyle choice, one that involved raising animals, knowing what they were fed, knowing that they were treated kindly, and that was quite different for us than going to Whole Foods to buy your meat. She was not interested in the problematic precedent that would be set if we were to comply with her request. And most importantly, this woman did not feel that we had a right to say no to her. The phone call that day didn't go well. She eventually hung up, but not before ominously declaring to my father that she would find a way to save that cow. The Monday of that week, as I spoke to my parents from here in New Hampshire and heard them retell the events of the weekend, I took out my laptop and I started scrolling through their news feed, and my stomach sank. In a period of less than 48 hours, an unbelievable viral attack started. It began with a posted Facebook group, Save Minnie the Cow. The local news was contacted. My parents had agreed to an interview, and the avalanche of viral media was in motion. Over the course of 2 weeks, you've seen these things play out. Just this viral firestorm unfolded. And I don't really need to describe all the details to you because you've seen these kinds of things in lots of contexts. Basically the same format every time. First, there's an issue that's kind of put forth as being above dispute, and there's a call to arms. And the sides of us versus them are established. People far and wide hop on board as the media latches on to the story, and really quickly, participants on both sides of the issue lose sight of the humanity in the people with whom they now find themselves in opposition. And that loss of a sense of humanity eliminates our need to try to see the other perspective, to try to understand someone else's point of view, or even to agree to disagree. Sounds familiar, right? On the farm, baby lambs were being born, school classes were visiting, seedlings were sprouting in the greenhouse. The rhythm of the life that my family chose continued almost without pause, but the fear of what was happening online was very real for all of us, even for me here in New Hampshire. From the moment I started monitoring the frenzy, I felt this intense mix of adrenaline and fear. It was all happening so fast, and no one on either side seemed to be taking any pause before throwing more fuel on the fire. Generally, I believe that there is great wisdom in ignoring much of what happens on social media. But it became quickly apparent last spring that if we remained silent, people feeling protective of us would speak for us in a way that often made the situation worse. And so I settled in front of my computer and tried to maintain control of our message, if for no other reason than to assure those coming to our defense that we had things under control and that they could go back to their own lives. I wrote a short statement that I posted on the protest page, Save Minnie the Cow, in which I explained the circumstances and some history about my family's farm and our business. In my post, I volunteered to remain online after posting it for half an hour should anyone want to have a dialogue. And then I sat and sorted through the barrage of messages that came back at me, putting aside angry, hateful retorts, and lifting up anyone who sounded halfway rational by engaging in a conversation with them and trying to come to a place of mutual understanding. My message was simple: that we respected different points of view, and that we had a right to our choice. I wanted that message to be visible to anyone who was still to come to the protest page, and so I planted it there. I planted similar statements on each of the change.org petitions that had been created, the one to save Minnie the cow, and the counter-protest that had been laid out to save the farm, not created by us, no matter that we didn't need saving. I also placed similar statements on the hateful reviews that were popping up on Yelp and on our business pages. My clarity during all of this stems from an understanding that's been growing in me about the way the culture that we live in operates. It is a culture where our lack of exposure to different kinds of experiences compels us to expect agreement from the people around us. And you can imagine this is kind of problematic. In the story of the cow, we are looking at a situation where people have become so far removed from the source of their food that they can no longer relate to the realities of farming. The fact that of the 4 million people living on Long Island, many of them have absolutely no experience with animal husbandry. It has created my family's business, which is something of a museum, a place where people can go and have a window into an experience that they do not know firsthand. And our willingness to vilify that which we don't understand has become dangerously easy because in our day-to-day lives, we aren't challenged to navigate different cultures, different experiences, and different perspectives. We live, many of us, in bubbles, surrounded by people so much like ourselves that we can hardly imagine it might be any different somewhere else. Online, this is perhaps even more true, as we can unfriend and friend voices based on our comfort with what they have to say. We read a headline and come to a conclusion about what we think in a matter of seconds, and then we pass judgment with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. We take intensely complicated issues and we dilute them to a value of good or bad. And hardly any time is spent considering all of the details that are being washed away in that process. The story of Minnie the cow gives us a way in to examine the dangers of this isolation that we've created. Communities today are divided across socioeconomic lines and across political lines. Families find the means to buy into the best school districts, or they're shut out from them. Decades of discriminatory housing policies have left us with whole communities that are almost solely white folks, other neighborhoods almost solely people of color. It's stories like this, personal experiences where we can examine these things that can cause us to stop and reflect, to sit back, and to take a different look at how our world is navigating. And we've been hearing about that all day today. Throughout the 2 weeks of the attack that was taking place, my family received messages from people all over the world. Farmers from as far away as Australia sent us messages, encouraging notes, asking us to stay strong because they could see in the experience that we were going through something that they related to, something that they have been experiencing themselves in their lives all over. At the protest in front of our house on our opening weekend, the original cow activists found themselves sparring with PETA activists who had come to join into the protest but disagreed as to the reasons for why the cow should be saved. Across the street, a counter-protest was formed, mostly by a group called Bikers for Trump. Those guys had decided that this protest was clearly the work of liberals, and they were there to stand up for the farmers. I was down that weekend and chose not to mention to the bikers that my family would probably be considered liberals by most measures. Seemed best to just leave the whole thing alone. When about the 2-week point, things started settling down. My family and our farm emerged from all of this drama relatively unscathed. As it turned out, 40 years investing in our community, teaching children lessons about living off the land, the grace and beauty of homesteading, proved to be a potent shield against an emotionally driven and sudden attack. If anything, it actually all became a pretty large advertising campaign for my family's farm at the cost of some sleepless nights and some long hours in front of the computer screen. But it offered something else as well. A reminder to look more closely, to withhold our judgment, and to value those experiences that are different from our own when we have the opportunity to encounter them. If we come across a different opinion, it should not signal us to draw our weapons. Rather, let's look at it as an opportunity to reach out from our own bubble and into that of another. Thank you so much.